In my time, I was the wealthiest woman in these United States and owner of the Bowers Mansion. My name is Eilley Bowers, but my friends, they call me Eilley. In my time, I was a working girl, the most famous of all the Comstock prostitutes. My name is Bulette, but my friends, they call me Julie. I hate it! hunter cow in part of that, if you don't mind. You see, I was converted to Mormonism at a young age, and rather poorly at that. It was a means to escape the poverty I faced if I remained in Scotland. So I married Mr. Hunter. He became a bishop, no less, and we came to the United States. And I promptly divorced the man when he began collecting wives. Nieces. He called them his nieces. Staying out all night with his nieces, wanting to move his nieces into my house. Nieces, indeed. You know, it was a very messy bit of early church history, and those were terrible years for me. So you know what I did then? I married another one. A Mr. Cowan. He was a very slow, easygoing sort of man. I thought he'd be easier to manage. At least he didn't have any other wives. So we left the Great Salt Lake and we came to the colony of Genoa. It was about 1855, thereabouts. And because we wintered over at the little fort, we were among the first to colonize out of Franktown. And because of this, we were able to acquire a lovely piece of property out at Washoe. It was a beautiful place, tucked in the trees, up against the mountains. But I was restless, you see, and I knew that my riches were not on that farm. I knew my destiny was tied somehow to that place above Washoe. You see, I inherited the gift of sight from my Scots ancestors, and I just see things. I know things in my head, and I knew that my riches were not on that farm. So I made Mr. Cowan move up there. He built me a little cabin, and I began cooking and doing the laundry for the prospectors up there. I sent Mr. Cowan out prospecting. But you know, he just was not ambitious. And he couldn't seem to understand that I knew life held something big for me. So, when President Brigham Young told the Saints to release their holdings in the Carson Valley and return to the Great Salt Lake, I sent Mr. Cowan back by himself. I'd had my fill of a lot of them and their immoral practice of polygamy. I sold that little cabin, and I went straight back to Genoa, where Judge Childs granted me a divorce on grounds of desertion. And I got the Washoe properties and alimony settlement as well. Nature, who makes the perfect rose and perfect bird, has yet to make the full and perfect man. I forget who said that, but you know 'tis true. So the prospectors up above, they were growing in number, and they still wanted me to launder their clothing and do their cooking. You know, I used to load those dirty clothes up in a little pony cart, bring it back down to the property in Washoe, where we had the hot springs. They were a rough bunch, but you know, I handled them well enough, in a motherly sort of way. I was being one of the only women up there, you know. I staked a few little claims here and there for myself. And then I bought a claim from a very tired and broke prospector. It was adjacent to a claim of that of one of my boarders, a Mr. Lemuel Sanford Bowers. Handsome man he was. And a gentleman without even trying or knowing why. And he was modest to boot. So you know what I did? I married him. I knew we were going to have one of the richest clays in Virginia, and so we did. Mr. Bowers built us a nice little home I buried 2 babies up there. The highs and lows of it all. The money really started rolling in. So Mr. Bowers and I decided that we would go to Europe to buy fine furnishings befitting our status, to put in the mansion that we were going to build out on the Washoe property, and so we did. It was about this time that our daughter Persia was born. Mr. Bowers and I spent our way across the continent, sending home thousands and thousands of dollars and beautiful things for our mansion. Anything that I wanted, that man would give to me. And we worshipped our daughter. But you know, it wasn't but a very few years of this fine and wonderful life. I lost Mr. Bowers to silicosis, an infection of the lungs. I was a widow, and Persia and I were alone. Well, you see, Mr. Bowers had been in charge of the mine and the mill, and I really didn't know how terribly mismanaged our affairs had been. Well, to be fair, we had both been generous to many, and we've been very extravagant. I sold the house at Crown Point. I even sold a little bit of the Washoe property, but our creditors were coming in hard and fast. Mr. Bowers came to me in a vision, and he suggested that I use the Washoe property, the mansion, for public entertainments. And so that's what I did. And for a time, it worked well enough. It kept us afloat in this manner for a bit. But you know, then I lost Persia to a terrible fever. And she was not yet even 12 years old. And after that, you know, things just didn't seem to matter so much anymore. After a bit, I opened the mansion again, but 'twas no use. My creditors had the best of me. All those friends from the past, when I had been wealthy, had turned their backs to my plight. I lost the mansion. I had essentially been swindled out of what was left to the mine. I turned my life to my peepstone. And I made my living for the rest of that time, telling fortunes. Virginia, Harrison City, Reno, San Francisco. Went down through California, went as far as Mexico, working as an itinerant fortune teller. Many people who depend on my visions. They call me the Washoe Seeress, and I suppose it suits me well enough. I have predicted many, many things that have come to pass.
Why, Lucy, what a pleasant surprise to find you here. Actually, I do have something to share with you. After this meeting today, I have a very important appointment with a domestic, a seamstress, laundress, proprietress of a boarding house, or a working girl seem to be our only choices. Now, Lucy, do you ever long for adventure? Well, I sometimes do. I remember when Nevada was only a territory and not yet a state. Well, that was just a few years ago, but the good times have yet to come to Virginia, including me. Oh, and those Pony Express rides, the dangers they faced, the adventures they had. I admit, I have a passionate fondness for one Pony Bob Haslam. Why, he was the most famous of all the Pony Express riders, with the fastest time ever. Now that he works for Wells Fargo Company and Express, I do get to see him from time to time when he rides into town. Oh, no, I've never met him. He rides out of town just as fast as he comes in. But if I ever got my hands on him, just what wouldn't I do? That's a real man, Lucy. Now, Lucy, why don't you have a beau? And pretty girls such as yourself and the thousands of men here on the Comstock, and you without one of them? Well, you'd have to choose wisely, though. You wouldn't want to have to share him with someone like me. But then you wouldn't want someone like that miraculously ignorant Sandy Bowers, as Mark Twain once called him. Why, do you know that his stuffy old wife actually thinks I have eyes for her husband? I so enjoy watching her bristle like a porcupine every time I insinuate that I do. Lucy, there's a saying, nature who has made the perfect rose and bird has yet to make the full and perfect man. I don't know who said that, but it's true. Now, Lucy, I hear that you do not approve of my use of laudanum. Why? It's very useful at keeping my headaches at bay and certain other discomforts. Why, I tire of those hypocritical parlor cats who tout the evils of laudanum and opium as if whiskey were any better. Absolutely not. Why, on more than one occasion, I have witnessed Dan DeQuille demoralized by his love of the drink. If the readers of the Territorial Enterprise ever knew how often his articles were written by Alf Doak instead when Dan couldn't make his way to the office the next day. Well, Lucy, what do you think? Do I pass the test? Wish me luck, mon cher. After I meet with William Sharon today, at this time next month, I could be the wealthiest woman on Mount Davidson. Take that, Mrs. Eilley Bowers. Ha!
I love money. I love money and what it's done for me and my life, because you see, wealth allows me to be associated with fine people, cultured and educated folk, refined society. Oh yes, wealth is also pretty and substantial things. A beautiful home, fine clothing and jewelry, traveling at will, eating what I like, oysters and champagne. Wealth is freedom, and I suffered much to attain my wealth. These hands will never be soft and lovely again. Try though I might, I could never forget the stench of the piles of filthy laundry I had to wash for the miners and the prospectors, the towers of tin plates that needed a scrubbing before the next meal had to be fed.
He gave me beautiful things. My daughter, Persia. And you know, though he was a simple and uncomplicated man, while it lasted, we had our fun. As I look around me at all the women of society, culture, and wealth, I question, what is wealth? When one is wealthy, one can live the good and clean life. But is it always a clean road to wealth? To me, wealth is the abundance of things which I desire most. I desire fine and pretty things, to be sure, but can I not also be wealthy in friends and admirers? I may not live in the grandest of homes and wear the finest of jewels, but do I not enjoy society by way of attending operas and balls? I may not own 30 gowns, but I own several well-made gowns that serve me and are not wasted in my closet. I have never really ever had to want for anything. I've always been clever enough to align myself with those who could provide for me adequately. Yes, my road from New Orleans to Virginia has had its bends and curves. While in San Francisco, I experienced such filth and debauchery I barely could stand it. There, earthquakes and fires were a regular occurrence. And my business was in low-rent neighborhoods and boarding houses. As the low fees I was forced to charge, I simply had to move on. That's when I arrived in Weaverville, and things turned around for me. While there, I was sometimes paid in gold pieces, as I had always dreamed. And I was considered a little more elevated than my counterparts. While in Weaverville, I was finally able to give back to my community. But that is outside of my profession. I donated to charities, and I nursed the sick from time to time. But yet, it was a town that when things slowed down, I simply had to move on. And that's when I left for Carson and came here to Virginia. Now, dirt. Dirt depends on your point of view. How you deal with dirt and when you deal with it is up to you as well. Dirt washes off. I certainly have reached the point where I have the freedom to make choices, and I am not ashamed of how I have obtained my wealth. Shame is a dirt more difficult to wash off than any other. Take that Bowers woman, for instance. She thinks I should be ashamed of who and what I am. Why? I do for their husbands what they would not, because their moralistic upbringings have taught them to be ashamed of enjoying anything too much. Poor Mrs. Bowers. She probably will never know just how much fun getting dirty can be.
Early on, when 'twas pretty much the prospectors and myself, 'twas manageable, but later, when the fever for riches spread, and people came in droves, many bad people came. There was no law, no order, no manners, no morals, no society. I worked so hard to try to grow and nurture a community where families could flourish, children could thrive. Do you know that a fine evening at McGuire's, or Piper's as it is known now, was all too often watching bears and dogs pitted against the other till a bloody horrible end? And when you went about the town, they all carried weapons. What? It forced this artificial society amongst the men. Oh, they were polite and well-mannered enough until they were drunk, and then they just began killing each other. I believe it was the lettered men. Twain, Doughton, De Quille, the writers of the pamphlets and the papers and the books, who could have made a difference. They could have influenced our society. But you know, they were no better than the rest of them. Drunken sots, the lot of them. 'Twas quite changed when Mr. Bowers and I went abroad, and you know, we'd only been gone for a 12-month or so. The town had been overrun by bad men, thieves and scoundrels, doxies of all colors, houses of sin and addiction, what real estate they occupied. No, there was much more to fear and hate than to love about Virginia. And what do you expect from a town that makes a whore an honorary member of the fire department? And to my utter disgust and dismay, I was constantly running abreast of her.
Some folks, like that wealthy Mrs. Bowers, so-called queen of the Comstock, think that material wealth gives one an exclusive right to enjoy society events. It just tickles me to see her turn pea green every time she finds me and my kind at an opera or ball. My escorts are her society, and sometimes her friends' husbands. She works tirelessly to bring culture and society to this God-forsaken, lawless, crime-ridden, diseased, and debauched town, all the while trying to keep the undeserving, such as myself, separate from her and her friends, only to find that she cannot control every aspect of life here on Mount Davidson. Why, you'd think she was going to catch syphilis from one of us every time she rushed in. I ask you, how possible is it to bring culture and society to a town where everyone must arm themselves with a gun and bowie knife, and too much drink puts them to use far too often? Gambling and betting on anything that moves is a main attraction, to be sure. The majority of the citizens of this town have come here to work in a thankless death trap called the mines, day and night, night and day. The reality is, most won't ever see their family in the old states again. Lonely and violent men who drink too much, gamble too much, and cruise D Street too much. A rough clay to mold into fine porcelain? Huh. I think I'm very fortunate to travel in all circles of society. Well, maybe not all circles. There was that awkward evening when a miner, Doyle Harris, who works for Mr. Bowers, escorted me to the grand opening gala of the newly built Bowers Mansion. I declare we were not there 10 minutes before that Mrs. Bowers nearly came unwound. Under no circumstances was a working girl prosecuted turns gray and wrinkles map my face. For now, I do enjoy society events by way of attending operas and balls. And I behave in a cultured manner as I was taught by my Uncle Jules. I read well, and I'm aware of worldly issues, much more so than those old birds in their gilded cages up on A Street. I do not play at life. I live it. And I keep my nose out of business that is not my own. That Bowers cow would do well to do the same.
I believe in a structured society. Law, order, manners, morals. I believe that people who work hard and prevail over sin and vice will have rewards bestowed upon them. I believe in the truth and purity of my gift and my visions. I hosted balls. I participated constantly in charitable events. I held luncheons. I tried so hard to influence our community. Do you know, the very first grand entertainment that Mr. Bowers and I had at our mansion, one of our miners had the audacity to show up with a Bulette doxy on his arm. I threw them both out into the night. Put that in your pipe and smoke it, I called her in the dark. Did she think that I wouldn't notice? Did she think I wanted to mingle with the likes of her? Mr. Bowers always said I didn't have to like her, but I shouldn't be mean to her. Well, I don't think throwing her out when she wasn't invited to begin with was being mean. They called me Queen of the Comstock. So why? Why? I would ask myself, do I even give a thought to that Bulette doxy? She was nothing but a bit of fluff fighting for survival. But you know, she was winning the war with the influential men of our community. I also think it was because she made living in this horrible wasteland of a community seem so easy.
Yes, there was a time when I was 16, when my regard for family and morals was little to non-existent. I admit I did not fully understand the importance of family. My desires fell upon the want of fine clothes, travel, and the flattery of men. Family? In my family, women married very young, bore many children, and then died of yellow fever, like my own mother when I was very small. As a brilliant young quadroon, some folks call us mulattoes, what chance at refined society did I have? I saw my only fate as picking cotton and tending to the motherless children of my father and uncles. Why, it was my own Uncle Jules who set me up in business and made sure that I was fluent in current affairs, literature and music, and worldly topics, all with a genteel approach as not to offend any gentleman. Later, my cousin Paul helped out when Jules was away attending to his affairs. Dear Paul, he was like a brother to me. While we traveled from San Francisco to Sacramento to the gold-field mining towns near Angel's Camp. Later, we moved to Carson City. Now, Paul came here to work at the Ophir mine, and I stayed Carson with my dear friend, Annie Smith. Annie's Hank Monk's girl. Why, my clientele were lawmen, ranchers, bankers, and politicians of Carson Valley. Did I ever miss my family back home in Louisiana? Well, distance does lend enchantment to the view. And I was all alone when tragedy struck, and poor Paul was killed in a cave-in at the Ophir. Why, after that, I wasn't able to face the world without the help of the laudanum. Laudanum soothes a multitude of grievances. And laudanum is also society's dirty little secret. While there are as many or more laudanum users here in society as there are on the road, in family and a faithful husband and sickly children, I declare, who here on the Comstock has an original family? Why, I have helped more of my friends bury their children than see them take their first steps. If I ever met the right man who wanted to settle down with me, marry me, and bear his children, I would think about it hesitantly. Only Thomas Peasley has ever made me come close to wanting to be devoted to one man. First fire chief in Nevada, foreman of Virginia Company No. 1, Civil War veteran, abolitionist, Catholic, and strong unionist. Why, he was tall, handsome, and ruggedly good-looking. He had a seductive smile and penetrating blue eyes. We were hopelessly in love for the first time in our lives, and we did give some consideration to marriage. We never openly flaunted our relationship, but it was widely known we were devoted to one another. Why, it was Tom, after the violent death of my dear friend Jessie Lester, who cheered me up by making me an honorary member of Virginia Company No. 1. Why, I had a new purpose in life, and I took my appointment very seriously. After I learned the news that my dear Tom had been violently attacked and savagely murdered by his rival Martin Barnhart, I was inconsolable. I lived in a stupor of brandy and laudanum for weeks. Aside from my love for Tom, I have never wanted to be a mother, nor have I wanted to take care of another man's home while he ran around town with someone like me. Queen of the Comstock? No. I want to be queen of good times. Who let you in here? Why, Mama
about? Well, put up your dukes, girl, because I'm going to take the mickey out of you. Oh, that's the way it's going to be then. Okay, this little game. Your repetition is your repetition, isn't it? Oh, look at that. Isn't that pretty? You're nothing but a nosy canoodler. Yeah, I'm gonna get you girls. It's gonna be a Highland fling! Bloody hell. Oh, little C Street! Get in. Window. Help me up, you little tart.
This is the first time that my petticoats have seen the light of day.
Well, that much I believe.
All right, I'm here. No problem. Age before you anyway.
Well, Miss Bulette, I do have to say that I'm terrible sorry that our animosity has gotten the best of us. Our sovereignty we were. You know, I suppose 'tis a cathartic thing in a sense because you know I really don't feel the terrible anger and hatred that I did previously. But I do have a confession to make to you. You see, I have seen your death. I saw you wrapped in a bloody shroud, Miss Bulette. I always thought that you would die at the hands of one of your jealous lovers. I never dreamed it would be a vicious and brutal attack by a petty thief after your clothing and jewelry. I know you worked hard, and I know that society has accepted you. You have risen so far above your profession, and I suppose I do too, and I'm terribly sorry to be telling you this, and I'm actually quite ashamed of my behavior this day.
Mrs. Dowell, I bear you no ill will. flowers. No one deserves the